Hey y'all, welcome back to the studio.
This project is really quick and easy. So what we have here is our nesting mug form. We are going to build this upside down, okay? So you'll want to make sure this crossbar is facing down. And then this first step, you'll notice that you have quite a bit of extra clay here. Let me give you dimensions. I cut this slab to 14.5 by 4.75 high, okay? So just shy of 5 inches. And you'll see as we start shaping this in here, we're gonna lose some of this height and then we can cut off some more when we need to. So I've already pre-measured. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick dry fit. When you do that, you wanna make sure that your clay is making contact all the way around the jig, okay? So you're gonna bring your hand and just put some pressure, and then you're gonna check that your seam is going to be in alignment. There you go. Let me see if I can. In alignment there, okay? Once I feel like that is nice and even, I'm going to go ahead and slip and score. Because I pre-measured before I started filming, I don't have to cut off any extra, but I did have to cut off a bit extra from the original measurements that I gave you. I like to bring it out a little bit long and then dry fit and then cut off whatever I don't need. Now, this step is really important. We are only going to attach here up until this crease in here, okay? That's for a couple reasons. Because we have some shaping to do all the way around the top. We don't want to secure that all the way up because this is gonna start crossing in so that we can get that nice close shape there. So with a heavily textured piece, you'll see that this seam, and with clay that's a little bit more on the wet side, you can see that it just kind of blends in really nicely there. So I'm gonna flip so you can see. I don't usually flip this around at this point, but I want you to see what I'm looking at here. So we have, our clay is really snug against the jig there. And then here you can see we have only secured the seam up until that first curvature there. So now is the fun part. We're gonna pop this on our banding wheel and we are going to start paddling our shape in, okay? I have done this, I usually start by hand, the warmth of your hand. You know, our body temp does wonders for clay because it softens it up and it starts to get into a moldable shape. So I will, to begin with, start just shaping with my hand. And then I will start, I will remove some extra here and then I will come in with my paddle. Now I can tell here, I am really overlapping a lot, so I'm gonna just cut a small V. Remember, it's easier to take away bits by bits than try to attach pieces when you've made your clay too small. But I can see there that we are still gonna have plenty of overlap here, so I was comfortable with taking that there. And then all the while, we are making sure that we are getting the clay super snug against the jig. The jig, the beauty of it is it gives you your form, your shape, so you know exactly how far you need to stretch the clay to get it hugged up against. Now this is kind of the sculpting part of the project. Now I can see that I have a ton extra here. I'm not gonna take off too much at a time, but I am gonna start just removing some of the clay that's starting to ripple at the top. I like to just get rid of the clay that's rippling. I'll keep doing this. Sometimes I'll cut 2 or 3 strips off while I'm making the nesting mugs. I don't wanna go too short because as you're pushing in, you can go below the jig line. And if you look at my original tutorial for just the regular size, so you can see here, I'm really close to the top there. So I'm gonna have to stretch that piece up a little bit. If you look at the original tutorial, I did go a little too short, and I'll show you, if you go and look at that one, just the medium nesting mug tutorial, you'll see that it worked out in the end, but I really did, I cut it a little too short. So you wanna make sure during the sculpting phase that you are not going too short on that clay. Okay, I'm gonna paddle this. And this is what's gonna give us that really beautiful angle. I have been making these nesting mugs with a heavily textured slab. but you don't have to. You don't have to have texture on your slab like that. So the texture, even with all this manipulation, stays in really nicely. All right, now I can start to feel the jig from the inside. See this lovely angle that we've created? So easy to do. Now I'm gonna start just cutting a little bit more off of this inner one here. I'm gonna start cutting right in here because I do want my seam to line up best I can. You can leave it as is and then it's kind of a wavy, it'll be like a wavy seam, and that's okay. Anytime you're cutting, follow your original angle so that the pieces can kind of snug in nice and even. So that's looking really good to me. I don't mind that little variation in the seam. Now remember, we have not slipped or scored that. So once you feel really confident that your clay is up against your jig snugly, just come on back in, and anything that's not attached, we're gonna slip and score. I'm using a vinegar slip here, very glue-like. I'm gonna make sure I get slip down into that little crack. If the slip does make contact with the jig, it could make it a little stickier, a little harder for you to remove, but not a big deal. I haven't had an issue getting it off, but just mind that a little bit. If you're feeling like you're having a little trouble getting it off, it could be because you're getting slipped between the clay and the jig. Okay, so because of the inner form, I have a lot of structure. I can come in and really make sure that this is nice and smooth there, especially at the seam, because that can be a bulky part. And then I will put my handle, I plan always to put my handle over the seam here. You don't have to, you can expose the seam, but I feel like that's kind of an intuitive place to put that. And it hides a little bit of that extra bulk if you have that. Okay, so now before we remove the jig, we want to make sure that our bottom is nice and even. So I'm going to really bend this clay over, and then I'm going to pick a spot here, usually around the seam, and I'm going to cut a U shape out. And you'll know when to stop because your knife will hit the jig, and then you just follow the jig, spin your work, follow your jig all the way around. And this will give you an even bottom every single time because you have that constant contact point there. How beautiful is that? All right. So I'm going to come in and just make sure that I'm bringing my clay back in nice and snug. How beautiful is that? Okay, so before I remove this, I want to make sure that I'm addressing my seam here. Make sure that's nice and smooth. This is where the bottom will go. And then you just want to release the clay from the form just a little bit, just so it's not sticking. We're going to flip this over and we're going to do the same thing to this other side here. We're going to make sure we address our seam. And then we are going to come through with our knife. You should have a little bit of displaced clay here because we were smushing the clay against the jig, and the clay's got to go somewhere, so it's usually up and out. So really easy. I love that I can use that as a guide because I always get really nice even pots, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and release the clay, make sure nothing's wrapped over, and then we are going to take our nesting mug jig out. Super easy. I just like to give it a little twist. You'll feel it release with enough cornstarch. There we go. It comes out like a dream, okay? It should come out no problem. And then now we have a beautifully round vessel. We have access to all of our seams here. So before I attach the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just smear my seam. So if it's overlapping, mine's overlapping like this, I'm going to bring the clay from the right to the left. Okay? If you're going to have any kind of cracking or failures, it will likely be at the joints where you're combining two pieces of clay together. So I like to come in with my finger. I will get the bottom when I flip this, and then I take my little slippy brush with a little bit of vinegar, whatever's still on there, and I come in and I just do some work and smooth that out. Okay, I'm gonna lift this up so you can see we've got our beautiful angle on the inside there. And then I am going to put our XL rim cone in, okay? And when I flip it over, this will be my little banding wheel. So I'm gonna move the big banding wheel out of the way here. I'm gonna bring my work right in front of me, and then I will flip this guy. If you fling a rim cone, they're yellow, so you'll be able to find it really easy. I've done that before. Okay, so now the rim cone is serving two purposes. It gives us a 360-degree spin, but it also is keeping tension on our rim. So as we are working on our project, we're not losing that round, okay? When we start flipping and maneuvering and adding bottoms on, we can really start losing our shape there. But the rim cone keeps it nice and tight, and keeps our rim in check, which is nice. Especially with these mugs that are meant to be in sets, you really want them to look as similar as possible. Okay, so let's attach the bottom. I've got our bottom cut out here. I always do a dry fit, or I try to. Okay, so that looks really good. The cutter that comes with the combo is always the best way to go because you're guaranteed that it's going to fit. It gives you that 1/4 inch. And when you get your jig, the cutters will always be bigger than the jig by about a 1/4 inch all the way around to account for the clay. So that looks really good for me. I'm going to go ahead and attach this bottom. And then apart from putting your handle on, we're done. You can see how fun this project is and how quickly you can really produce a lot of these sets. I would encourage you to make sets of 2, 4, or 6. Keep them even, because cups like this that are meant to sit inside of each other, meant to nest like this, they're best sold in sets. Now, of course, you can sell them individually, but I think the whole appeal is that they nest right into each other. And I think people like that because coffee bars are a really big thing right now in homes, and people like to leave really pretty things out. And this is an example of something that you could market that could be left out on the counter because they're really beautiful to look at. Okay, so I've got my bottom here. I'm gonna dry my hands off, always working with clean, dry hands so you're not lifting any of your texture. And then we're gonna go around and we're just gonna tack this down. There will be some overhang depending on how much you tapered the bottom in. That's not a problem with our mini shark fin. We will take care of that. I take our small anvil, I fake a foot, and I pop this little foot in, and I'll show you the effect that we get. It's a really subtle effect, but it raises your work up just a little bit, and it gives it just a little extra something. So you don't have to add that element. That's an optional design choice, but I like to fake that foot there. And then now that we've popped that in, you're gonna come back through, make sure that you've got your work nice and tacked down. Okay, so now we're ready to go back onto our regular banding wheel here. Got our banding bat on here, keeps my Studio Pro insert nice and steady for me. And we are going to just create some slip on here. I just take some water. I like to use my inserts that already have clay from when I throw on the wheel because the clay is already there and it makes a natural slip. So now we are going to flip this guy over and swirl it around, and you'll feel it start to grab, and you just want to get as close to center as possible. I'm going to keep our rim cone in right now while we're working. I like to keep tension on the rim there, and then we are going to address this side here. So you can take your finger like this and just pick up any extra clay, any of that slip, and just get rid of that. Now you can leave your bottom with the bump there to make it decorative, but I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna take our mini shark fin, see if I can get you in here a little bit closer. All right, there we go. I'm gonna start at a wider angle, and the purpose of this, for me, this first step is just to get rid of that extra clay at the bottom. That feels really thick, especially with these forms. A little bit with the lace pattern makes it a little daintier. So I'm gonna go around, and then as I start spinning on my second revolution, I start tipping my shark fin up and grabbing more and more clay here, okay? Always have your bottom in mind. I carve into my bottoms like that. So I like to lay in the groundwork of a really nice big flat surface to do that, okay? So I will do this, I will make, I don't know, 10 revolutions, and I will flip the mini shark fin over and use this spine, especially when you get into the medium size and the petite size. It can be really hard to get down into this angle, but when you flip the shark fin over and use the curved part, it sneaks right in there, which is nice. All right, so making sure I have no residual slip. You don't want to leave any moisture down here at the bottom. That looks good to me. Let's bring it back out. Okay, so that looks good to me down there. And I'm just gonna release this, just rock it a little bit. You can see if that was your last step, that would be a perfectly finished foot. You don't have to make such a steep angle like that. That's just something I do for my design features. And then we will treat the rim and this inside seam here. So we've since attached our bottom. Let's bring you overhead here. We've since attached our bottom. So now we have to work with this. Sorry if that's a little dark. Now we've got to make sure that we get that seam down in here. Let me see if I can do something for you. There we go. This seam down in here, I've just got a little bit of vinegar left on my brush. I'm gonna go ahead and just start smoothing this bottom seam. And then I will come in with a rubber shaping tool. And I like that indent there because the glaze pulls really nicely and it just gives you some glaze variation. Now, even though I am using a wet brush, I am not leaving a lot of moisture at the bottom. That wet, slippy stuff will cause cracks. And then you don't want to put too much pressure in the middle here because we've popped in our foot. So now that seam is taken care of. My vertical seam looks really good. I will come back at leather hard and address that a little bit more. Bring it back down to the side here. All right. So now let's do something with our lip here. I want it to match our first one. And on the first one, I did round the lip a bit here. So I want to match that design with this one. And I'll show you how I do that. So I like to just take the sponge while the rim cone is in. Make sure I'll do some pre-finishing work here. A lot of my finishing work is done at leather hard because I'm less likely to ding my pot or misshape it once it's just firmed up a little bit. I lost my slip here. So if your pot starts slipping around, just add some more water to your center tile there. And then it's not perfect because you're not securing it with clay, but it does give it a little stick. And it's easier than kind of grabbing those contact paper, those rubber mats. I feel like I always lose track of those and they get really dirty. So this works. So I went with my sponge and then I've got my finger and you can see the rim cone is making contact all the way around. That tells me that my rim is true. And then I'm gonna spin and lift straight up, grab my mini shark fin here. And then I like to wet it a little bit. I don't know if that does much, but we're gonna spin, start. Remember, our top should be nice and flat because we've already leveled that. And then I just use a sawing motion with my mini shark fin and I start putting in that rounded top. I will go over this with my sponge. You can use a red rib to refine this. The trick is to just keep moving your shark fin up and down so that you're not accumulating too much clay in one spot. Kind of let it run up and down the tool. Okay. I feel like that's good. Take my sponge. And then at leather hard, I can come through and do some more smoothing here. But it's nice. You want to really mind your mouth feel on your vessels. And as you can see, by doing all this, I've taken up a lot of that cornstarch that was in there. And that'll burn off in the kiln anyhow. So now we have a nice round top. Pop my rim cone back in, and voila. So easy. It is such a sweet and easy project. And getting that angle at the bottom is super easy when you use the jig that accompanies that. So once this is a little more firm, I will remove the rim cone and I will then add the handle. And that is my set. So I hope that you appreciated that quick tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. It really is, you can make these, I bet, front to back in 10 minutes or less each once you've got all your clay and everything ready to go. They're really easy and super fun. And let's see, we could probably even, this one's greenware. Anytime I'm manipulating it, I like to keep the rim cone in so you can see. And then that's that. That's how it will nest. So we've got our large nesting mug jig with the cutter combo. Okay, thanks for following along. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you soon.